This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Heretic 2 by Matthew J. DiStefano. Ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about faith? In Heretic 2, I dive into LGBTQ affirmation, rejecting divine violence, and embracing universalism in a bold post-Christian perspective. If you're done with outdated dogma and want a justice-oriented, inclusive view of spirituality, then this book is for you. Get Heretic 2 wherever books are sold and start rethinking faith today. This Choircast podcast is brought to you by High Minds. Join host Andy Colenso and Matthew J. DiStefano as they tackle culture, justice, spirituality, and all the big questions shaping our world. High Minds isn't about talking points or hot takes. It's about deep, insightful conversation that inspires and challenges. Tune in to explore new angles, question the status quo, and elevate your thinking. Listen to High Minds wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Radical Love Life, an ongoing series of conversations with thought leaders exploring faith outside the boxes. Hosted by Mark Dilcomb and Kelly Wilson.
Hey, Mark.
Hello, Kelly.
How are you?
I am freaking awesome.
Well, that's good to hear. You look freaking awesome.
Thank you, my friend.
Very,
Yeah,
look
very
sharp
spiffy, right?
today,
This
yeah.
is the look I'm gonna try this out for a while. I'm gonna walk this out. So
Yeah.
you know, the tie, the shirt, and the vest, and see, kind of like like get a style going here.
Yeah,
Get a
I
little-
like it. I like it.
Thank you, my friend. And you are doing the lumber sexual look.
Yes, I guess that's what it's called these days. I got the beard, I got the flannel, I got the long hair, going for like the John the Baptist. Yeah. We were watching,
Yeah.
what was it? Severance the other night. We're getting caught up on the first season. So
Oh, I haven't seen it yet.
The second
so
season.
okay.
But one observation I had is from back when I used to work in an office space in Manhattan is I hate wearing suits. I hate the feel of like wearing a suit.
Dude, you wore suits?
Occasionally, yeah, like when clients were around, and
Are you serious?
yeah, I mean, there always had to be something kind of like creative flair about it.
I'm sure you did that, but I just like, I say that I'm coming from a place of love, and
Uh-huh.
so I'm not going to say anything that I think is backhanded. So please,
All right.
but that's like putting a straight jacket on a bear. That's what that's what came to mind. Like, you suit, no,
Yeah, it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Okay, good, and hopefully you're not insulted by that.
No, I'm not at all. No, that's one of the reasons why I changed everything and started working from home. Like I had a panic attack
Oh wow.
in front of a client one time, like a room full of clients, and it was all like, I'm trying to be something that I'm not.
Wow.
I'm trying to be some kind of corporate madman type guy. Yeah, I had to walk out of the room. I thought I was having a heart attack or something. Yeah.
That's a true panic attack. If anybody's ever had a panic attack, that's what it feels like.
I really had to think about my life and what I was striving for. And I was like, you know what?
Right there, all at
I
that
just
moment,
wanna-
like it just kind of.
Oh yeah. It comes into like, yeah, when you're sitting in front of like $25 million client and running out of the room, everything comes into stark relief.
Right, it was like,
And it was like a movie scene. Like I'm in the bathroom, like looking at myself in the mirror, like who am I really? And yeah, after that, everything changed.
dude, for all the years that I've known you, you have never shared that story.
No.
That's fair.
Yeah, it was really, and interestingly enough, I know this isn't the topic for today, but
It's a good way to get started.
that I got kind of nervous about public speaking for a while because once it happens, it's like the synapses are there.
Oh, dude,
And
you're talking to a survivor of panic attacks.
And I found a book that helped me. It was a certain type of therapy. It's acceptance and commitment therapy.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
And it's the book was called Everything Might Go Terribly, Horribly Wrong. The way I found
I
this
like the
book,
play
though,
that it will go wrong.
is I started doing some research online about panic attacks, and the psychologist therapist who's an expert in ACT therapy wrote this book is a man named Kelly Wilson. I kid you not.
Meant to be, bud.
And yeah, and we're now friends.
Are
Actually,
you
I was like,
serious?
oh yeah, I wrote him, and I was like, "You're not gonna believe the story I'm about to tell you, but your book like really saved my life. Like it helped me
Wow,
figure out how to be authentic in front of people again."
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I mean, ultimately, what we do here is look for authenticity in its many, many forms, right? But that's, so it does actually connect to what, even our conversations, it's about us being our authentic selves.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard to watch somebody, when you go to an event, you see somebody nervous because you really like the audience is like, I want you to do well.
Of course, by default, we want to, unless you gotta.
But it's hard. You get focused in, you're in that moment, and you're thinking like things might go wrong, and you get into a spiral, and it's all about like getting back into the moment. Like there's no past, there is no future, there's only now. It gets very
just in the moment.
There is a spiritual element.
Oh, totally. Living in the moment.
Yeah.
I love it.
But yeah, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share that story, because I think particularly like men don't talk about like, this is the time that I was weak. This is the time that I was falling apart. This is the time that I was sad, that I needed to go cry somewhere. Like men don't always talk about.
No, vulnerability and testosterone don't. They don't. They don't go hand in hand so well. Yeah, it's a funky cocktail. So, well, it's always a pleasure, brother, to spend time with you. And here we are in another episode. So, for our awesome listeners, this is the Kelly and Mark episode.
That's right.
Every so often we do these where we don't have a guest for this one so much. The topic that I have selected for us, and Kelly is willing to go here with me.
Sure. Let's go.
Oh my God, here we go. The title is going to be Faith Under Fire, the truth about Christianity in America today. So folks, let me give you context to this. There is an article. Feel free to go out to look at it. We'll also put it in our show notes. Although you have to be a paying subscriber to see it. It is on the New York Times, and the article is about Aaron Renn, R-E-N-N, and his book. It was an interview with Ruth Graham, who she does a lot of interviews for the Times, and she interviewed him about his life in Carmel, Indiana, and the book that he wrote. And so
I think that's actually Carmel.
Is it Carmel?
Yeah.
Oh, they're fancy, like Carmel, California?
I think so.
Oh, okay. Well, Carmel, Indiana. Sorry, Carmelians. No hate letters, please. Kelly corrected me. So it talks about it being an idyllic town. Graham starts off the article saying it's, Carmel looks like a town that could be either, something you would see on Mayberry RFD with Andy and Opie and Aunt B, or also Bedford Falls, which is a reference to, I think, I don't know.
It's just a wonderful life.
It's a wonderful life.
Mr. Potter. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Bedford Falls. This all to say, I got really angry about this article. When I was reading it, I started yelling at it already because he puts out things that we are going to discuss. Now, Kelly is the temperate one of us in this.
Really?
Well, I think you are. I don't know. Maybe I'll get you fired up. But so the thesis is, folks, that there are 3 recent situations or epics, I think he calls them.
Kind of like periods of time.
Periods of time, correct. So his first one, he says that from the years of 1964 to 1994, Christianity was the conferred social status, and Christian moral norms were dominant. Then in 1994, we entered what would be the neutral world that went on for approximately 20 years, 2014. And that is where Christians was one of many acceptable belief systems in a pluralistic society. And then in 2014, we entered the negative world, and we're currently in that. And that specifically says Christianity, especially traditional beliefs on gender and sexuality, is now viewed as socially and morally problematic, especially in elite spaces. Now, I'm not sure that he's not right on that, but we'll dig into that because I could see that. So you're wondering, well, what define these times? Now, he will say that the numbers, the years for the neutral world, 94 to 2014, are probably a little subjective and not precise, but negative world is really driven by Obergefell or Obergefell, depending on how you want to pronounce it, versus Hodges, which is the support of same-sex marriage at the Supreme Court level. That was the moment. It was a watershed moment when people who had issues with the positions held by some Christians now became anathema and was seen as bigotry and like in very negative lights. So that's the setup of this. Now we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this article. Okay.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yes. And Mark sent me this article this morning, and I was looking over it, and as a Christian, as a person who claims that title of Christian, I find this article infuriating. I can only imagine what somebody who lives in America who's not Christian would look at this as. And I say that because, for a few reasons that come right off the top of my head. One is American, like 2/3 of Americans still claim to be Christian.
Yes.
I'm looking at the latest Pew Research or the
PRRI.
PRRI, yes.
Right. The research, the study that just came out this week, coincidentally, with 20,000 people, 50 states. Right. It's called the Values Atlas and just got released. Yes.
Right. So even though no particular denomination of Christianity claims the majority, 2/3 of Americans are still claim to be Christian, that they're allowed to practice their religion. Like there are places in the world where Christianity really is persecuted, and the United States of America is not one of them.
Not according to them.
And there are lots of laws and traditions and social norms that are in place because of certain types of Christianity.
Yes.
Now, the whole idea that Christian values are blank, are this thing that is represented by, Andy and Mayberry, is just that. It's an assumption. So like when I talk to a conservative Christian person about somebody who's gay or transgender, they say, oh, well, that's not Christian. I'm like, you've jumped a couple of steps from the Bible to go, I assume that Christianity is the doctrine that is filtered through the evangelical interpretation of the Bible. Therefore, I get to define Christianity. Whereas there are gay Christians, there are transgender Christians, there are right.
I was raising my hand, folks.
And
as a queer Christian.
So that kind of infuriates me, that there's a certain branch of Christianity that believes that they have the exact right definition of Christianity and nothing else. Anything that goes against that is non-Christian. But yeah, the whole notion, this increasing notion of like, oh, we're persecuted, it's unpopular to be Christian. Like I believe that Christian eschatology, like end times prophecy, has something to do with it. Like Christians have to be persecuted. That's part of the story. Jesus is like you'll be persecuted for righteousness' sake. Therefore, they got to have an enemy. And yet, this guy's also complaining about how Christianity used to give you some kind of social cachet or superiority. So it's like, wait, are you trying to be the leaders and rulers, which Jesus never said you would be as Christians, or are you trying to be persecuted, or are you both? Like what? How can you be both?
You are so spot on. I completely missed the Pharisee or Sadducee take on that, because that's exactly what he was saying. That it was great. It was to this, and he references Carmela Indiana as being the
I'm
perfect
probably totally wrong about that. But I am
perfect
from
archetype
Indiana,
city,
so.
that because they've had the same mayor and Republican control. Well, this is not about politics, folks, but this is how the article. Go read it, or listen to it. You can, if you're a subscriber. You will they reference it like it's this perfect idyllic little town with they play gospel music in the town square, and they got rid of their traffic lights, and it's all about roundabouts, and the streets are spotless, and the traffic the police department give tickets out for moving violations, and people are nice to each other behind the steering wheel and all this stuff. Yeah. Okay, great. All right, Kelly, to your point though, is that not what they're setting themselves up to be? And I'm not saying, okay, now I am injecting myself. If that's what you want, knock yourself out. Like if that's what you feel like your life is fine. But you and I've had this conversation before where, I don't know how else to say it, where do they get off talking for all Christians?
Well, I think part of that is a lack of education about Christian history, about the variations on the Christian theme, like how many different forms of Christianity have existed since the first century, like since the church fathers first tried to figure it out. And
part of me wants to be a smartass right now, but I'm not, because I keep to your point, because keep going.
Well, just that there are a number of people who just assume that the version of Christianity that they've been taught is Christianity without doing the homework, without going back through. And once you already have a framework in mind, you can read the Bible and scriptures jump out at you because they reinforce what you're already believing, and you kind of skim over the ones that don't reinforce that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's a little arrogant.
I think that's a good word to use. Maybe not. Maybe unwittingly arrogant, if that's such a thing. Can you be unwittingly arrogant, or are you suggesting it's purposely arrogant, that they are the chosen, they have this right and nobody else?
I think it's unwittingly, and I'm wary of saying that because
okay, fine.
I'm one of those like college educated intellectuals, and I don't want to be like I'm smarter than those guys.
I know, and neither do I. But
I know that like with issues of sexuality, I've talked with people and they say, well, the Bible says that's wrong. I'm like, show me where.
Show me where. Right.
And they can't always, or they have to put together 3 or 4 different verses.
Yeah, do the clever phrases, right?
But there's a lot of assumption going on, and I've some of the same folks that I've talked to, friends, family members over the years, because I've been kind of fighting this fight since I was a teenager. People say like, well, if any part of the Bible is wrong, then how do I know to believe any of it? That for somebody to
right.
Like there are folks that have that their faith is based on everything being right and true and factual, and the Bible all kind of saying the same thing. And if there's any crack in that wall, then by their own admission, it would all fall apart. And
you okay? Do you truly have family and or friends that their faith has to be so perfect? If there's any kind of like errancy inside that it's going to like crumble?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I've had people say to me, like, if any part of the Bible is wrong, I'm throwing the whole thing out.
Oh my God. Seriously?
Yeah. And my thought is, well, it's not, I don't even think of it in terms anymore of like errancy or inerrancy.
No, right.
The Bible does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's the history of a certain group of people or a certain group of groups of people and their experience with God.
That's exactly what it is.
It's not a science book. It's not totally a history book. It's
right.
It's not any one particular thing, but it's pretty easy to go in and say like, this book says this thing and this book says this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't all say the same thing.
Correct. And that also builds the bridge to the differences. And that's why, you know, I found, you know, I'm like you, I've felt this for a number of years now. I look at the Bible as an amazing story, or not a story. It's amazing. It's an amazing catalog of our ancestors and how they experienced the divine for their time in that kind of position. And then with that kind of context, I can actually like lean in on the stories and like, oh, I get it. And like so in what would be a conversation, that would not be Bible study to me, but it would just be a conversation about putting ourselves in the shoes of these folks to try to even understand what was their life like and what caused them to write the way that they did. I think that adds an amazing depth and richness to the entire story of what that faith is, you know, and beyond whatever it, you know, I'm not even talking about Old Testament, New Testament. It's just like, this could be anything. This could be the, you know, the Quran. It can be, you know, the Tao. You learn about our ancestors and how they see that, and we can take away, you know, what spirituality was for them and how does that apply to our spirituality today. So, yeah.
Yeah, that might be a little far out for some Christians whose focus is, you know, the only gate to heaven is through Jesus.
Through Jesus in the Bible.
But it's still important though to back up and say, wait a minute, there isn't a particular group that owns Christianity. That there's, you know, even like Catholics and mainline churches and evangelicals and the Pentecostals and, you know, the historic Black church, and like they all have different theologies.
I do. There's countless theologies. Literally countless, because we each can have our own theologies. We just don't talk about it that way, right? You know, our theologies are what we are handed and then we process inside and out. Some do it consciously, some maybe less so. But those in themselves become our own theologies.
Right. But it's not so. I mean, the words that are on the page are the words that are on the page. So when I see somebody like this guy, I'm looking at his, you know, his article, this Andrew, you know, he's sitting there in his
Aaron Renn.
Oh, yeah. Aaron, sorry. Yep. He's sitting there in a suit and talking about wanting a certain level of social status because of Christianity.
So
this seems pretty clearly antithetical to what Jesus said, what Paul said, that you're not going to have social status. You're going to be persecuted. You're going to be powerless. You're going to be.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because this is an abstract from the story itself. Renn argues that Christianity has shifted from being a social asset to a social liability, especially regarding gender and sexuality issues. And then you had mentioned the PRRI survey, which shows that, yet, as you confirmed, that Christianity remains the dominant religion in America. So then you have to ask the question, so is this really persecution, or is this just a loss of cultural dominance?
Yeah, and that's, you know, it's funny that he should cite the sexual and gender issues as the problem, because they don't directly affect him unless he's queer, except in the realm of tolerance.
Okay,
so
keep going.
Is it a Christian right, duty, obligation not to tolerate someone with a different sexuality or gender expression because you think it's wrong?
Well, so let's take that. You set me up well, my friend, because PRRI and the Trevor Project, and folks, if you don't know about Trevor Project, amazing organization. Oh, please go check them out. Trevor, TREVOR project.org. We'll put it in our show notes as well. They just released their 2024 findings, they focus in on the well-being of LGBTQ youth. And so they're both studies independently found that queer youth are disproportionately harmed by conservative Christian teachings. And specifically, and this if there's if there's anything that makes my blood boil and make me cry at the same time, it is this little fact that 39% of LGBTQ plus youth seriously considered suicide in the past year, and 84% report needing mental health support, but many are not able to access it. And so this begs the question, if Christianity is under attack, why are LGBTQ youth the ones facing the higher rates of depression, bullying, and self-harm? And folks, I'm going to tell you, that's fucked up. I don't know other way to say that. When you are screwing with the youth of our country, or not even our country, just youth in general, because of how you interpret your belief systems and applying to that, that's called abuse. And there's no other way to do it and call it anything else. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe there are a lot of people out there who believe that they're doing good by protecting. This is what the language they use, they're protecting the children, that somehow they envision that there are a group of really perverted adults who are going around and training children and grooming children and deconstructing traditional roles of men and women and sexuality, and that God is really pissed about all of this, and that the adults are leading the children to hell, and
that's so absurd,
and that their Christian duty is to intervene and protect those children from these adults who are leading them into sinful behaviors and sinful worldviews.
Yeah,
this is all real.
It's all real because you're teeing up what is my next point. I'm like, I swear, and folks, he's not reading what my notes are that I prepared for the show. So
no, I'm reading like my private messages in Facebook. Like
okay, here you are. So, Renn advocates that Christians should stop trying to fit in and instead build their own institutions, which they are very successful. Think about all the Christian academies, the universities, etc., businesses, and media.
All the hijinks at the Department of Education and whatever to be able to funnel
absolutely
tax dollars into, I've got a waiver so I can use my local private Christian school instead of.
We're seeing it right now.
These crappy public schools that are indoctrinating our children to.
To your point, they're indoctrinating their children. So he is, that's how he sees it. Like this is their way, which goes back to his town of Carmel, Indiana, and positioning it to be that perfect conservative town. Now, further on into the article, it talks about that there are actually developments, towns under construction, one in Tennessee, and I forgot where the other one was, by a wealthy developer out of Texas, of all places, that there are going to be they're designed to be conservative towns. Now, I don't think the article suggests that they're modeling it off of Carmel, but the point is that this is like Mayberry RFD right here, or, It's a Wonderful Life.
Did they lobotomize all the gay children in Carmel?
There's no mention of queer folks in there.
And drugged into submission? Like what? How?
and Graham herself, the one that wrote the piece, she did say that there was I think she said it was a nascent amount of people that are not white, all the black and brown. So, but she didn't even speak to queer folks. So
yeah, it's there. Yeah, I don't know what it is if they're just people who've never knowingly met someone who's gay. There's this idea of that it's the parents' fault, it's the school's fault, that if they hadn't introduced the idea that the children would follow whatever the standard is. And I'm trying to think how I don't know how you would make a child have certain sexual desire one way or the other.
Nobody told me to be gay.
Like I can't
I'm just saying.
like I can't get my kid to do their homework. I mean, how the hell am I going to make them like change their entire
being?
Yeah, and what's happening is that if kids come out to their family and the family is not accepting, is not affirming, is not doesn't project that unconditional love, then that's when you've got a higher rate of mental illness among the kids. You've got a higher rate of suicide ideation and attempts and self-harm and running away.
They wind up on the streets. Yes.
And like, how is that good Christian parenting? Like, that's the thing that when I see all this legislation, I'm like, so parents are just going to come home and be like, all right, kids, you're not gay. In fact, it's against the law.
It's against the law to be gay.
That the kids are just going to be like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. All right.
You know, Kelly, you are onto something, because we as adults habitually do exactly this. We try to legislate something we don't like, whether it has been alcohol or, you know, anything.
Right.
Anything that this is a vice that is against God. We are going to legislate against it, and it never goes well.
No, it doesn't. No, and I have a feeling it didn't go well in the biblical times. I mean, you think about like the way that Paul talks about the law. He's like, the law made me sin.
Okay, and like
the law doesn't save you.
The law does not save you.
That
is true. You are not saved by law.
No.
We only save ourselves.
Yeah, and even I read there's a book. This is from the 60s, or I think like late 60s, early 70s, with the beginning of the new look at Paul movement, where people started to be like, oh yeah, Paul was Jewish, wasn't he? Let's actually look a little bit deeper at his teachings. There's a book called Paul for a New Day, which is a very hippie title, by this scholar named Robin Scroggs. And he said that he interpreted Paul as saying, even if you believe that you can be saved by following the entire law, and you do, that itself is a kind of greed or avarice, that you're taking the salvation ability away from God.
Oh,
being like, I saved myself.
Wow. Well, that's why even a moment ago I said, well, we have to do it ourselves. I said with grace, because that's very true. You that is bestowed upon us.
Yeah, it's like the guy who came to Jesus and said, how do I get saved? And Jesus was like, follow the commandments. And he was like, well, I followed every single commandment. He's like, okay, well then sell your stuff and give it to the poor. And the guy turned around and walked away.
He said, yeah, okay, I can't do that. Nope. Thank you for bringing that one in. That one trips up a lot of people. Like, what? You want me to do what?
Yeah, what? Yeah. But I just say all that. Yeah, the legislating it by law, and there's a reason why the studies show that even among conservative Christians, like the more people that they know who are queer, who non-binary, who don't fit the norm, the more accepting they are, because there's something about actually meeting a human being, hearing their story, listening to them, having empathy. What's been kicked around on Twitter lately is the sin of empathy. They're trying to make it like, yeah, empathy is a tool of the devil. Don't you know? If you try to understand people, it takes you away from the rigidity of the law.
We've got a few more minutes in this episode, so I definitely, there's a couple of things I wanted to get to, but you can't just drop that and not elaborate. You are suggesting, or not suggesting, you're saying that there are people who are interpreting empathy as an act of sin?
Yeah. This has come out on like certain conservative Christian podcasts lately.
So it's so to be sinless is to be an asshole and not be empathetic or compassionate. God, where does that come from? Where did Christ ever do that? That is like the anathema of the dude.
I know this is my AI assistant here is pulling from the internet. The sin of empathy is a theological idea that empathy can be misused and lead to sin. It's based on the idea that empathy can cause people to lose their sense of boundaries and identity and to surrender to others' sinful emotions.
Oh my God.
In one
This is how they rationalize like being empathetic to queer folks.
Yes. And I don't know who Joe Rigney, I think maybe he's a podcaster. In one example, Joe Rigney describes empathy as being like jumping into quicksand with someone who is drowning.
So let him drown.
Well, it's, I don't know if it's let them drown, but it's don't get in with them. And this is
but that's letting them drown, isn't it?
Or throw them aboard or a rope or something that.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. Just don't get in with them, but you could throw them a rope and then walk away.
Yeah. It's what's the
don't be attached.
Yeah. It's the whole idea that there's a certain type of love that requires you to save people from their sin. Allowing people to just follow their feelings, which you can see the theological background of this. If it goes all the way back to original sin, where you can't possibly trust yourself. You must trust the authorities.
You must.
That it's actually love to say to somebody, no, don't be that, be this.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a huge disconnect, as you can see people online fighting each other where they're like, well, you're not really being Christian because you don't love them. And somebody else can say, I do love them, but that doesn't mean I have to accept everything they do. And I think that's the crux of the matter. That's where by feeling like Christians are unpopular for not accepting what other people do, they're feeling persecuted.
Well, that's really the basis of Renn's book.
Mm-hmm.
It truly is.
Like, I have to accept this world as I can. And you don't have to.
Right. You don't have to.
I mean, I sometimes wonder what would happen if, the baker who didn't want to bake cakes for a gay couple put up a sign out front. Like, I don't bake cakes for gay people. Like, what? Let the market figure it out.
Yeah. Okay, so you bring up a good point. I think if you ask most queer folks about that, should you go chasing after the business because they did that? No, fine, great. Tell me. Moving along. No, I'll go find a baker that will bake my cake for my gay wedding.
Yeah, the problem there is that
public accommodation.
All these businesses, they're not in isolation. They're using the public electric grid. They're
exactly
whatever, and it's a slippery slope.
It is
opening up with all kinds of.
Yeah, please don't blast me with emails about that. But I get it because it is more than that. But for me personally, I will be, a little salty about it for a second, but it's like, at least I know where you stand. And if you're not harming me because you actually aren't, you're going to annoy me because like you're being selective of what, is clearly not accommodating, but I'll go find, somebody that is. And people will stand differently, say, no, you need to push the button on, they have to be accepting to all. Okay, great. Then go fight that fight. But I wanted to get to something that you just mentioned, marriage, and this is important. So this is coming from the PRRI American Values Atlas that we've talked about. Just came out this week, folks. So the question was asked about marriage, same-sex marriage, and even if Obergefell or Obergefell was overturned, where would the state stand on this? And Americans who live in states that have legal protections in jobs, public accommodations, and housing are slightly more likely than those in states without these protections to favor non-discrimination laws. So 78 to 71%. And I say this because this also goes into, more about where does same-sex marriage go to, which I'm about to give these numbers. It is now supported by the majority in every state, with a high support in Massachusetts at 87%, Vermont at 86%, and the District of Columbia at 82%. And he's like, wow, of course, because that's all on the East Coast. But it was across there. The numbers in the lowest were, just to clarify, Oklahoma's was at 50%. That's the lowest. Okay. Oklahoma, 50. So half the people are in favor, half the people are opposed. West Virginia is 1% higher at 51%, and Louisiana was at 52%. And if Americans in states where same-sex marriage would remain legal if Obergefell versus Hodges was overturned, 73% still support marriage equality in those states where it would become illegal. So the point is, I don't want you, like, I suppose, for those folks that are Christians that are opposed to same-sex or same-gender marriage, which I prefer to say, if this is what is so important to you, you got to know that the majority of folks, now you could say it's still wrong regardless, but the population is kind of moved on. Like, okay, and moving on about this. And 3/4 of the people still want rights for LGBTQ folks. There was another thing that is kind of important out of this study, and this may play into what you were saying about how we've been down the slippery slope of tolerance and accommodation, because more than 1/3 of LGBTQ Americans are Gen Z, 36%, slightly less for millennials, 34%, but our generation, because we're in the same generation, Gen X, is 17%. So we are actually half of Gen Zs. And baby boomers, this is anything pre-1964, is 11%. And interesting enough, they have a number here that just 1% of the silent generation. But so I guess somebody could argue, well, this is what's happened. Like, we got a lot of Gen Z people that are LGBTQ.
That's right. These kids today.
That's right.
They've been corrupted by culture. A culture that is determined by Christianity. That I had an interesting a conversation with a conservative friend not long ago about this very issue, just about, well, why are people so concerned about what other people are doing? Because there's nothing about gay marriage or same-sex marriage or being inclusive that prevents you from doing what you think is right and you from not doing, like same thing, like you don't like abortion, don't have one.
Don't have one. If you're against same-sex marriage, don't get gay married, right?
That's right. But their response was interesting, because the way that they put it was, we will be judged not only by what we do, but by what we defend.
Okay, take me there. We got a few minutes left on our. I guess that's kind of a new concept. I've not thought about that. We are being judged collectively. In that, is there anywhere in? Is this trying to go to the second coming, like the condemnation of mankind? What?
Well, yeah, in part, but there's also
or humankind.
There are different branches of Christianity that look at how kingdoms in the Hebrew Bible were either, like, if they followed the commandments of God, they did well. If they didn't follow the commandments of God, there was famine and they got enslaved by somebody else. And so the belief is that as a nation, that if we're following the laws and making sure that nobody's not following the law, that we'll be super blessed and protected. And that if we allow stuff that's not, if we defend or allow or tolerate sin,
it's going to bring us all down.
Be like, well, screw you. That's
bring us all down.
Yes. Yeah. And that's not a new idea. I remember, we didn't really have much internet at the time, but like calling Pat Robertson's compound a couple days after 9/11, being like, what are you saying? Because he and Jerry Falwell went online and they said, or went on TV and they said 9/11 happened because America allows homosexuality.
That is correct. They did say that. How
And
someone
it,
forgot
and
about
that
craziness.
the origins of the idea are there. They're like, because
That's true.
that's like a wicked thing, and
Yep.
they've allowed, God was like, okay, fine, then I'm not going to protect you from your enemies.
Hagee is his name down in Texas. He does that same shit, or he used to. He's backed off on that because he would say storms and other issues are a result of the gays, and there's been plenty of other. It seems like they usually come out of Texas that they do shit like this, and will say, well, because the gays, this happened. Okay, good point. Now we got to kind of wrap up this episode, but I'm just
getting warmed up.
No, but this is what an amazing conversation this has been, which is kind of peeling back like the top layer of this big onion. So maybe we'll come back to this again. I guess for the listeners, I would certainly encourage you again. Please go read the article and think about these kinds of questions. And I even have some other questions that we could post in the show notes as well that you might ask yourself. That go along with that. In fact, I'll make sure we do that. We'll post those questions in there. So but really do read the article and try to be, hopefully you can be more objective than I am, because it made my blood boil for, like several times, and I had to put it down and yell and then go back to it. But I did make it through. And in fact, I even want to read his book, which we'll see how I do with that. Well, you can check in with me later if I actually succeed in getting through his book. So,
well, and I think as kind of some parting words for this episode, I think it is important for conservative Christians to think about the Beatitudes, to think about the actual the teachings of Jesus, and what how Jesus approached people who were different, who had different beliefs. Think about like the Good Samaritan, and
Samaritan woman,
and also the way that Paul addressed different people with different belief systems, even as he was trying to reconcile Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians. But I also think it's important for progressive Christians and other people in society who are not Christian but want us to be able to live together, to think about, are there things that we're saying or doing that are making conservative Christians feel particularly unwelcome? I mean, it's one thing to respond to, like, please stop picketing my funeral. But it's another thing, like, are there things that we're saying of like, oh, that's that, that Christian thing or whatever? Like, are there ways that we can build bridges there? I see you give me a look like, why should we give them any quarter? But
no, because
sorry for projecting that on you.
No, and I'm glad you did, because we're in Lent as we're recording this, and it's not that I don't think about this stuff outside of the Lenten season, but in particular right now, it's like we're all called to unconditional love, right? That if any of us, if there's one thing that unifies Christians, is our following the teachings of Jesus, the dude, right? And which
right, it's like you'll know that you're Christians by your love for one another.
There you go. And so there's no conditions on that. So therefore, it is unconditional. That's what the dude did. And so that's how I try to live my life to the best of my ability. So even when I get really angry about this particular person, Renn, and his book and his point of view, and how off track I might think he is, I'm still called to love him as a divine soul. That doesn't change that fact, even though I see the harm that is done by his take, right? But that's the life in which we live, and we can still hope and quite honestly pray for the person, or whatever them, or continue to and most importantly, continue to pour out love, right? I will not slow down my love for my neighbor because I don't agree with what they say, even if they hurt.
Right.
And that's hard, but yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to balance that with the whole, don't tread on me thing. That I know that, the conservative right has sort of owned that, but I'm saying that too, as a liberal, like, practice your beliefs however you want, but don't don't put prohibitions around me. And that's
Beautifully said.
we have a hard time balancing that, but I think it's definitely something to think about.
I think this is a great place to wrap up this conversation. Thank you, Kelly. It's been a great combo. I hope everybody else enjoys it as much as what I just hear with Kelly. So
yeah, and thank you for proposing this. This has been really,
it's been a fun conversation.
Really fun. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Kelly. Thanks for listening to this episode of Radical Love Live, hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson. Recorded at the Bravery Studios in Garfield, New Jersey. All rights reserved. Find our episodes on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And check us out at radicallovelive.com, along with our personal websites at markdilcom.com and kellywilson.com. This is Radical Love Live, where we explore faith outside the boxes.
Embark on a journey to the heart of an isolated and restrictive island where secrets simmer beneath the surface. In Brandon Andrus's What Can't Be Hidden, follow Thura as she uncovers the dark truths of PRRI, navigating through betrayal and redemption. This tale of courage, love, and the quest for freedom will captivate you from the very first page. Get What Can't Be Hidden, available now from Choir Publishing.
This Choircast podcast is brought to you by my book, Unless a Seed Falls to the Ground, Welcoming the Death of the Whiteness Gospel. I wrote this story as a plea for white Christian America to enter into a season of hospice spirituality, to recover from the cancerous lie that we can start over, be in charge, and recover some original purity of Christianity. One friend calls it a love story to the church, the United States, and the entire human family. It's available now on Amazon.
Are you ready to embrace a deeper, more intentional way of living? Introducing Deep Calls to Deep, Meditations for Your Spiritual Journey, Volume 1 by Brandon Andrus. Deep Calls to Deep offers a 1.5 years of weekly meditations to inspire spiritual growth and guide you toward a more meaningful, embodied life. Order your copy today wherever books are sold and begin your journey into greater connection and purpose. Deep Calls to Deep. Let your soul awaken.